In the hotel room, I stood frozen before the bathroom mirror, my reflection unrecognizable. The fluorescent light overhead was merciless, highlighting every line of pain etched across my face. My left cheek had already ballooned, the bruise spreading in shades of violet and angry red across my cheekbone. My lip had split at the corner, and the coppery taste of dried blood clung stubbornly to my mouth. For a long moment, I didn't breathe, I didn't move. I looked like a victim. That single thought sliced deeper than the physical pain. Amanda Gordon, the woman who had built a career out of discipline and intelligence, stood staring at the wreckage left by my father's fist. The realization hit me with crushing force. This was the reward for 32 years of compliance, of silence, of playing the family peacemaker. I had been the one who mended rifts, who absorbed insults, who shrank herself to keep the peace. I had accepted criticism without protest, had endured comparisons to Justin without protest, had smiled when my accomplishments were mocked, and in return, my father had struck me, my mother had laughed, and my brother had applauded. I picked up my phone from the counter, my hands trembled, though not from fear. Rage coursed through me, making my pulse throb against my bruised skin. I unlocked the screen and checked for messages. Nothing, no calls, no texts. Not from my mother, who should have been horrified that her husband had just assaulted their daughter. Not from the 39 relatives who had sat in that dining room, their eyes wide, their mouths tight, their bodies frozen with the weight of cowardice. Not even from Aunt Jean, who in the past had offered me the smallest crumbs of kindness, a hand on my shoulder, a look of sympathy across the table. The silence of my phone spoke louder than any words. They had made a choice. To them, my pain was insignificant compared to preserving the illusion of Gordon family perfection. My bruises, my humiliation, my shattered trust, they were inconveniences to be brushed aside. I sat on the edge of the stiff hotel bed, pressing a bag of ice against my swelling cheek. The sting of cold seeped through my skin, numbing the ache but doing nothing for the fury building in my chest. And as I sat there, memories I had buried years ago rose unbidden, dragging me back through a lifetime of proof that I had never truly mattered. Age 7, clutching a math test with a perfect score, the first in my class, I had rushed to show my father, but he waved me away, too busy celebrating Justin's soccer goal from the weekend. My tears had earned me a lecture about not being dramatic. Age 12, hiding behind the staircase as my mother sipped Chardonnay with a neighbor, laughing as she said, "Justin has Richard's business sense. Amanda? Well, maybe she'll find herself a successful husband one day." They chuckled as if my worth began and ended with marriage. Age 16, holding a gleaming trophy from a regional economics competition, only for my father to sneer, "They probably lowered the standards for girls. Don't let it go to your head." Age 22, bringing home my first serious boyfriend. My father spent the entire evening interrogating him about money and career prospects, while my mother picked apart my cooking, my outfit, even my posture. I remember sitting at the table, humiliated, while the man I loved gave me an apologetic look that said everything. He wouldn't stay. Age 27, learning that a promotion I had worked tirelessly toward had been denied. Weeks later, I discovered the truth. My father had phoned my managing director, warning that I wasn't ready for leadership. He had sabotaged me under the guise of protecting me. The memories came like blows, each one confirming the truth I had refused to face. The pattern was unbreakable. It wasn't a matter of me not trying hard enough. It wasn't that I hadn't proven myself. It was that nothing I did would ever be enough for them, unless I forced it to change. My laptop sat on the desk across the room, its sleek silver surface reflecting the sterile hotel light. I moved toward it with purpose, my breath shallow, my heartbeat steadying with resolve. When I opened it, the familiar glow of the screen felt different tonight, not just a portal to work, but a weapon waiting to be unsheathed. As part of my due diligence before accepting the Blackwood position, I had combed through every possible conflict of interest. What I had uncovered about my father's empire had shocked me, though perhaps it shouldn't have. Beneath the glossy brochures and carefully curated image of Gordon Financial lay rot, questionable billing practices, tax maneuvers that skirted legality, and in at least 3 separate cases, clear misrepresentation of investment performance, lies told to clients who trusted him with their futures. None of it had yet risen to the level of automatic regulatory enforcement, but I knew enough about finance, enough about reputational risk, to understand the truth. If these details ever came to light, Gordon Financial would crumble. Trust was the lifeblood of his empire, and one puncture was all it would take to bleed it dry. I had saved everything: spreadsheets, internal memos, email trails. At the time, I told myself it was professionalism, that I was just being thorough, but deep down, I think I knew I was building insurance, a safety net for the day my father's tyranny crossed a line I could no longer ignore. And tonight, staring at my reflection with a swollen cheek and a bleeding lip, I realized that day had come. Family loyalty had been the invisible chain that bound me for decades, but now, loyalty and survival stood on opposite sides of the line. and for the first time in my life, I was prepared to cross it. I am Amanda, 32, and until last month, I was the family doormat. For years, I let them dismiss me, ridicule me, and use me as their emotional punching bag. But all of that ended the night of our annual reunion, when I finally dared to stand up for myself, and my father's response was to punch me square in the face in front of 39 relatives. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of my mother's laughter. She actually laughed. My brother Justin clapped his hands like he was at a sporting event, grinning as he said, "Serves you right." That was the moment everything I'd suspected about my family was confirmed. They didn't just fail to value me, they took pleasure in my pain. But what they didn't know, what they had never bothered to consider, was that the quiet daughter they'd pushed aside for decades wasn't powerless. I held knowledge, leverage, and the will to finally act. That night, while my cheek throbbed and the taste of blood lingered in my mouth, I made 3 phone calls, 3 conversations that set in motion a chain of events that would unravel everything my parents valued most. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. I grew up in Fairfield, Connecticut, in a neighborhood that looked like a postcard. Our 5-bedroom colonial sat on a neatly trimmed lawn with a white picket fence and flower beds my mother hired landscapers to maintain. To outsiders, we looked like the picture of success, but inside that house, appearances came at a brutal cost. I learned early that my worth wasn't measured by kindness, intelligence, or effort. It was measured by how well I could please my father, Richard. Dad wasn't just a businessman, he was a man who built his company from the ground up, molding it into a regional powerhouse with over 300 employees. His success was his identity, and his reputation was sacred, but beneath the polished veneer, he was a tyrant. Living with him felt like navigating a minefield. You never knew what would set him off. One careless remark, one hesitation, even a glance he didn't like, could trigger an explosion. His rage was volcanic, sudden, and terrifying. The sound of his voice raised in anger could shake the walls of that house. Among relatives, his temper was infamous, though they laughed it off as Richard just being Richard. But in the business world, he wore a carefully constructed mask of charm and respectability. His colleagues and clients saw a disciplined, brilliant man who demanded excellence. At home, we saw the cost of that discipline: violence, intimidation, and humiliation. He had a favorite saying he repeated at the dinner table as if it were scripture: "A Gordon never shows weakness. A Gordon commands respect." He believed respect was earned through fear, through dominance, and yet, in that house, respect only flowed in one direction, toward him. My mother, Catherine, knew her role. She perfected it. She was the polished suburban wife, blonde hair always styled, lips painted, dresses tailored, her smile bright enough to convince neighbors that everything was perfect. Behind closed doors, she was his most loyal defender. When his tirades left me sobbing, she would pat my hand and whisper, "Your father works so hard for this family. The least you can do is not upset him. You know how he gets." Her words weren't comfort, they were instructions: stay quiet, stay small, don't fight back. Then there was Justin, my brother, 3 years older and everything I was not. He was the golden child, the heir apparent. He mirrored Dad's ambition, his aggression, even his arrogance. While I clawed for crumbs of recognition, Justin was showered with praise for even the smallest victories. If I brought home straight A's, my father barely looked up from his scotch. If Justin scored a single goal at a soccer game, Dad cheered like it was the World Cup. That favoritism didn't fade with time, it calcified. Justin followed Dad into the family business straight out of college, sliding into a position of privilege and influence he hadn't earned. I, on the other hand, fought for every inch of success outside the family's shadow, and no matter what I accomplished, to them I was still just Amanda, the late bloomer, the one playing at being successful. What they didn't realize was that in dismissing me, in underestimating me, they had given me a gift: freedom. Freedom to build my own career, my own network, and eventually, my own power. And on the night of that reunion, when my father struck me and my mother laughed, that freedom turned into resolve. They had no idea that Amanda, the overlooked daughter, was about to bring the Gordon family empire to its knees.